She doesn't look like first class. That sentence hit her before she even sat down, loud enough for everyone in the front cabin to hear. Sharp enough to silence the casual chatter around her. Vanessa Taylor paused mid-step. She glanced down at her seat 2A window, first row. Exactly where her boarding pass said she belonged, but now the attention of half the cabin had shifted to her. A black woman alone. Dressed simple, no designer purse, no fancy jewelry, just confidence and quiet grace. The voice had come from a white woman, early 60s, sitting across the aisle with her pearls clenched like they were a shield. Her tone wasn't angry, it was worse, condescending. Like Vanessa was a child who'd wandered into the wrong classroom. Before Vanessa could respond, a flight attendant approached with a strained smile. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you sure you're in the right section?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure 2A first class." The attendant took the boarding pass from her hand and examined it like it had to be fake. One moment, please." She walked off toward the gate without another word, leaving Vanessa standing there exposed. The murmur of whispers crept through the cabin like static. Then came the chuckle, deep smug, from a man 2 rows back. "Probably used airline points or a diversity scholarship," he said, laughing to himself like he was the only one in on the joke. Vanessa clenched her jaw. She had lived too many versions of this moment. Boardrooms where no one expected her to be the CEO, hotel lobbies where they handed her valet tickets, and now a plane where her presence in first class was apparently up for debate. The attendant returned. "I'm sorry. There seems to be a system error. We've had to move you to economy." "It's temporary." "Temporary." Vanessa repeated, her voice low but tight. "Or convenient." The attendant blinked. "Ma'am, we just asked for your cooperation. We'll sort it out after takeoff." Vanessa glanced back at the first-class passengers, some avoiding eye contact, others still staring amused or indifferent. Not one of them had spoken up. Not one. She nodded, slowly took her bag, and walked down the aisle. To them, she was just another black woman who thought too highly of herself. But what they didn't realize was that this flight wasn't just about going from LA to New York. This flight was about to become a lesson, because in just 10 minutes, the captain would make an announcement that none of them would ever forget. Vanessa walked down the narrow aisle, clutching her laptop bag, like it was the only thing anchoring her to the ground. Row after row of passengers glanced up, then away, some pretending to sleep, others pretending not to care. But she could feel it. The weight of 100 eyes, judging, whispering, wondering what a woman like her was doing up front to begin with. She found her new seat, 23C middle row, sandwiched between a crying baby and a man already hogging the armrest. She didn't sit right away. She stood for a second, steadying her breath. She wasn't about to break down in front of them. Not today. As she lowered herself into the cramped seat, the man next to her glanced over and gave a smirk. "Tough luck. You almost made it." Vanessa looked at him, expression unreadable. "Excuse me?" He leaned closer. His voice was low, oily, just saying. "First class isn't for everyone. Especially not when you come in underdressed." Vanessa turned away. She'd dealt with worse. But not today. Today stung deeper than usual. Maybe it was the way the flight attendant didn't even pretend to double-check. Maybe it was the woman who called her out like she was some kind of intruder. Or maybe it was the silence from every single passenger who watched it happen and said nothing. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. Not because she had anything to write, but because it gave her something to do with her hands. The screen blurred slightly as her eyes welled up, but the tears never fell. Vanessa. Taylor didn't cry on planes. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Hey, are you okay? She looked up to see a young woman, maybe early 20s, sitting in 23B biracial. Curly hair pulled into a bun. Big, curious eyes. I saw what happened, the girl said. That wasn't right. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded quietly. It never is, but it still keeps happening. The girl offered a half smile. I'm Maya Vanessa. There was a pause. Then Maya asked almost shyly, You looked kind of important back there, like you walked in like you owned the plane? Vanessa let out a soft laugh. Not bitter, just tired. Funny you say that. Before she could explain, the intercom crackled. The captain's voice boomed through the cabin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We'll be departing shortly. Just a reminder to fasten your seatbelts and keep all personal items stowed. Flight time to New York is estimated at 5 hours and 15 minutes. Vanessa closed her eyes. 5 hours. She could survive 5 hours of this. But then the voice added something odd, something that pulled her attention. We also have a very special passenger on board today, someone who's been instrumental in making this airline what it is. We'll have more to say after takeoff, but for now, let's just say we're honored to have her with us. Whispers sparked around the cabin like static electricity. Maya turned to Vanessa. Wait. Was he talking about you? Vanessa didn't answer, just smiled softly and looked out the window. Meanwhile, up in first class, the flight attendant who had dismissed her was now fussing over a couple of businessmen with champagne flutes. The white woman in pearls who had made the snide comment earlier was flipping through a fashion magazine, clearly unbothered. The suited man, 2 rows back, was already half asleep. None of them realized that the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Back in coach, Vanessa finally turned to Maya and asked, Do you know what it feels like to build something from the ground up and still have people act like you don't belong in the very thing you created? Maya nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to understand. The engines began to hum. The plane started to taxi. Vanessa leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself. 10 minutes. Maya glanced sideways, puzzled. What happens in 10 minutes? Vanessa didn't open her eyes. She simply smiled. A small, knowing curve of the lips that told Maya this wasn't over. Not even close. As the plane ascended into the clouds, the cabin buzzed with the usual chorus of seatbelt clicks, rustling magazines, and awkward elbow shuffles. But for Vanessa, the world shrank to one cold thought. How many more times do I have to earn my seat just to have it taken away? Up in first class, the passengers settled in with glasses of champagne and entitlement. The suited man who had mocked Vanessa earlier was bragging loudly to the flight attendant about his latest consulting deal. It's all about knowing people in the right rooms, he said with a wink. The white woman in pearls leaned over and whispered, Can you believe that girl from earlier tried to sit up here? I mean, she looked like someone's assistant. Not someone who belongs in first. The flight attendant, still unaware of the slow-burning fire she'd started, offered a polite chuckle. You'd be surprised what kind of people show up with first-class tickets these days. Doesn't mean they belong. Laughter agreement. Disdain passed around like appetizers. Back in row 23. Maya kept watching Vanessa, who now stared straight ahead, composed but alert. She couldn't help herself. Okay, I have to ask, Maya whispered. Are you someone famous? Vanessa turned to her with a calm that came from experience. No. Not famous, Maya. Waited. But I built this airline. The words landed heavy. Maya blinked. Wait. What? I'm the founder, CEO. Horizon Airways started with 4 employees and 2 leased planes. Vanessa continued. Now it's a global carrier, and I've personally hired or fired most of the executive team on this plane. Maya stared at her in disbelief like she was looking at a superhero in disguise. Why didn't you tell them who you were? She asked. Vanessa's eyes darkened, but her voice stayed soft, because I wanted to see how they'd treat me when they didn't know, when they thought I was just another black woman sitting in the wrong seat. Silence hung between them. Maya nodded slowly, and now Vanessa looked forward again. Now they find out. Just then, the captain's voice cut through the cabin speakers. Good afternoon, folks. This is your captain speaking. We're now cruising at 36,000 feet, and I hope you're having a comfortable flight so far. I'd like to take a moment to recognize a very special passenger on board today. Someone who's meant a great deal to this airline. A beat Vanessa Taylor, the founder and CEO of Horizon Airways, is traveling with us today. Her vision, leadership, and commitment to excellence have made this airline what it is. The cabin fell into stunned silence. She boarded quietly. She didn't demand attention, but her presence today deserves respect to any crew member or passenger who may have failed to show her the courtesy she deserves. Consider this your wake-up call. Gasps echoed from first class. The white woman in pearls dropped her champagne glass. It rolled across the aisle, the suited man's face drained of color. Wait. Passengers twisted in their seats, peering down the aisle toward coach. The flight attendant who had dismissed Vanessa earlier now stood frozen at the front of the cabin, mouth slightly open, hand gripping the back of a seat. Her face was white as paper. Maya grinned. Oh my God! That was you he was talking about. Vanessa finally stood. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Just walking slowly down the aisle toward the front, back, straight expression. Calm was enough to shift the entire atmosphere of the plane. Passengers who had looked through her now looked at her. The shame was thick, palpable. When she reached the front of the first-class cabin, the flight attendant tried to speak. Ms. Tail, I had no idea. Vanessa raised a hand. Don't, she said. Her voice was steady, measured. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me like a human being, but you chose not to. She looked around at the passengers. And that's the real problem. Not just the seat I paid for, but the way some of you looked at me and assumed less. No one said a word. Behind her, Maya stood up in the aisle and said clearly, she didn't lose her seat. You all lost your dignity. Vanessa turned back, surprised, then smiled. She took one last look around the cabin, nodded at the captain standing respectfully by the cockpit door, and said, I'll be in the jump seat for landing. She returned to row 23 as if she never left, but the plane was no longer the same. Where there had been giggles and judgment, now there was silence. The kind of silence that follows a slap, not out of pain, but out of recognition, out of guilt. Maya shuffled aside so Vanessa could slide back into her seat. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her face said it all. Respect, awe, pride. The toddler next to them, blissfully unaware of the tension in the air, kept tapping at her iPad. But the mother leaned forward slightly, whispering just loud enough for Vanessa to hear. I'm so sorry for what they did to you. You handled it with more grace than I ever could. Vanessa nodded politely. Thank you. Meanwhile, up front, the ripple of embarrassment was spreading fast. First class had turned into a gallery of frozen portraits, rich faces red with discomfort. The man in the suit who had laughed about diversity points was now rubbing his forehead, avoiding eye contact. The woman in pearls. She looked like she wanted to disappear into her seat. The flight attendant who had rejected Vanessa's seat earlier stood at the curtain, eyes down, lips pressed so tight they lost their color. Every few seconds she looked back toward Coach, like waiting for a verdict. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds leaned back in his seat. He'd flown over 30 years, seen snowstorms, engine failures, one emergency landing in Jakarta, but this was new. He tapped the co-pilot on the shoulder. I'm stepping out for a moment as he walked through the cabin, still wearing his stripes and calm authority. Passengers watched him like students waiting for a principal's ruling. He moved past first class through the galley and stopped at row 23. Vanessa looked up as he crouched beside her row. Ms. Taylor, he said, voice low but respectful. I wanted to speak to you personally. She met his eyes. No malice, no smugness, just calm. You didn't have to say anything. She said I did, he replied. Because silence is complicity, and I've flown enough years to know exactly what just happened. Wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a pattern. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. You saw the whole thing. He nodded. I had the manifest. Saw your name before you boarded. Wasn't sure if you wanted to stay anonymous or not. But when I heard what happened at the gate, I kept quiet. I shouldn't have. She paused, studying him. Thank you. He straightened up. I've already filed a report with corporate about the behavior of the crew. And I'd like to formally apologize on behalf of everyone wearing this uniform that caught the attention of the flight attendant who had been lingering nearby. She stammered, stepping closer. Miss Taylor, I didn't recognize you. If I had known Vanessa raised a hand again, gently. It's not about recognizing me. It's about recognizing bias, that you made a snap judgment. Not because of my name, but because of how I looked. That's what you should apologize for. The attendant looked like she might cry. You're right. I'm sorry Vanessa didn't speak for a moment, then I accept your apology. But remember, your job isn't just to serve champagne. It's to serve every passenger with dignity. Don't wait until someone's title gives them value. The attendant nodded, eyes glistening. I'll remember that. As she walked back to the galley, the captain turned once more to Vanessa. We land in about 3 hours, if there's anything I can do in the meantime. She smiled softly. Actually, there is. 3 rows up, a middle-aged black couple was seated in Economy Plus. They'd been quiet the whole flight, but their eyes had never left Vanessa. Now, as the captain approached them with a hushed request, their expressions shifted from surprise to disbelief, then joy. Moments later, the curtain between economy and first class opened again, this time not to remove anyone, but to invite. The couple was led forward, hand in hand, to the seats Vanessa had originally purchased. 2A and 2B. Gasps, whispers. Vanessa watched from the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Maya turned to her. Friends of yours. Vanessa smiled. No. Just another couple who deserves to experience what it feels like to be treated with respect, no strings attached. A few rows up. The man in the suit turned his face to the window, ashamed. The woman in pearls watched the couple take their seats and muttered, Well, this is just performative. Vanessa didn't respond, but Maya did. She turned in her seat and called out loud and clear, "Maybe it's only performative because you finally had to watch." The woman's face twisted. She said nothing more for the rest of the flight. By the time the plane began its descent into New York, the cabin atmosphere had shifted entirely. Conversations were quieter, eyes more thoughtful. For the first time, many were forced to confront the comfort they'd taken for granted and the harm they'd overlooked. Vanessa looked out the window, the skyline slowly taking shape through the clouds. The city below didn't know what had just happened. 36,000 feet above. But soon it would, because the right lesson told at the right time can travel farther than any plane. The wheels kissed the runway with a soft thud, and the cabin jolted gently as the plane slowed to a taxi. Passengers leaned back as they always do, impatient, tired, already reaching for their phones. But this landing felt different, heavier. Like everyone had aged a little in the sky, Vanessa stayed seated, her eyes calmly scanning the cabin. She caught glimpses of stolen glances, guilt, curiosity, maybe even admiration. But she didn't need the validation. She never had. The couple she'd invited to first class waved at her from the front as they exited. The husband gave her a discreet thumbs up. His wife mouthed, "Thank you," before disappearing down the jet bridge. Vanessa stood, grabbed her modest carry-on, and waited for the aisle to clear. Maya lingered beside her. "Do you think people will really remember this?" Maya asked. Vanessa glanced over. Maybe not their words, but they'll remember how it made them feel. As they stepped off the plane, the same gate agent who had ignored her presence earlier was now standing, stiff eyes wide, clearly briefed and deeply embarrassed. "Ms. Taylor," he stammered, "welcome back to JFK. We're honored." She walked past him without stopping, not out of spite, just clarity. Some apologies didn't need to be heard to be understood. By noon the next day, a passenger's cell phone video had gone viral. Not the initial altercation that hadn't been recorded, but the captain's in-flight announcement, the stunned reactions, the couple being invited to first class, and Maya's parting shot. Maybe it's only performative because you finally had to watch. It hit Twitter first, then Instagram, then TikTok. Within 24 hours, the story was everywhere. Black woman denied first class, turns out she owns the airline. The headlines ran wild. So did the think pieces. Modern racism in the skies. Grace in the face of prejudice. CEO teaches masterclass in humility without saying a word. Morning shows begged for interviews. Talk show hosts quoted her lines. Civil rights leaders reposted the clip teenagers made edits with inspirational music. Airlines scrambled to double-check their employee training programs. But through it all, Vanessa remained silent until Friday morning. She appeared on a nationally televised interview wearing the same navy blazer from the flight, no glam squad, no designer labels, just her and her story. The host asked the question everyone wanted to hear. "Why didn't you speak up in the moment?" Vanessa paused. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "Because I've spent my whole life having to explain my worth, and this time I wanted people to see what happens when you don't fight, when you let people reveal their assumptions, and then let the truth walk in behind them." The host nodded. What was the hardest part? Vanessa didn't blink that no one said anything, not even the people who knew better. Another pause. But I didn't need validation. I needed accountability. In the weeks that followed, Horizon Airways announced a new internal program called Assume Dignity, mandatory training designed by Vanessa herself. It wasn't just about racial bias. It was about how we look at strangers, how we assign value based on shoes, tone of voice, or seat number. The flight attendant involved was not fired, but she requested a transfer, a quiet one that came after a very long face-to-face conversation with Vanessa behind closed doors. She didn't shame me, the attendant later shared in a podcast. She made me understand how small my world had become, and how dangerous that is when your job is to serve everyone. As for Maya, she got an email from Vanessa's assistant 3 days after the flight. Subject line, an open door inside, was a job offer. Community Engagement Officer. Full benefits. Room to grow. Maya cried at her kitchen table before she could even finish reading. 1 month later, Vanessa stood in front of a packed ballroom at an industry awards gala. She'd been named Executive of the Year. But her speech wasn't about profits or expansion plans. I didn't build Horizon Airways to be the biggest. She said I built it because I was tired of boarding planes where no one looked like me in the cockpit or in the boardroom. I built it so little girls with big dreams didn't have to shrink themselves to fit in. Coach. She held the glass award lightly in her hand. And just to be clear, it was never about the seat. It was about the story people told themselves about who belongs in it. Applause rose like a wave. First, polite, then thunderous. In the back of the room, Maya stood next to the former flight attendant, both clapping, both changed. Later that night, alone in her car, Vanessa sat quietly. The world had seen the moment, but only she knew the cost. The years of being overlooked, the meetings where she had to repeat her ideas just so someone else could rephrase them into credibility. The whispered comments in elevators, the double standards, the invisible toll. She took a breath, then smiled, because this time the story had gone differently. This time, the world had listened. The city shimmered outside her window as Vanessa drove through the late-night streets. Tall buildings glowed against the velvet sky, quiet and majestic, as if they too were listening to her thoughts. The gala was over. The applause had faded, and yet the echo of it lingered not in her ears, but in her bones. She pulled up to a small, familiar diner tucked between a laundromat and a barber shop in Harlem. The kind of place that still smelled like bacon grease and old dreams. She'd come here often as a teenager, notebook in hand, dreaming up flight routes and sketching out plane designs while sipping cheap coffee with too much sugar. She stepped inside unnoticed. At first. The bell on the door jingled softly. An old man behind the counter looked up, then did a double take. "Vanessa Taylor," he said, eyebrows raised. She smiled. "Hi, Mr. Griggs." He grinned, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't expect to see you back in this place. Thought you traded us in for rooftop brunches and private jets. I still like my toast burnt and my coffee too sweet," she said, sliding onto a red vinyl stool. He poured her a mug without asking. "I saw you on the news." She nodded. "You made us proud, girl." Vanessa stirred her coffee slowly. "It's strange," she said. "I always thought the hardest part would be building the airline. But it wasn't. It was proving I belonged in something I built." Griggs leaned in. "And now the whole world knows you do? Do they?" she asked quietly. "Or do they just like the story?" He studied her. "You think people only respect you now because you're the CEO?" She didn't answer. He placed the rag down gently. "Then maybe it's time you stop worrying about why they respect you and focus on making sure the next girl doesn't have to fight for it the way you did." Vanessa stared down into the coffee, The reflection that stared back was still her, but stronger now. Not because of the viral clip, not because of the speech, but because she'd finally stopped asking for permission to exist. 2 weeks later, Vanessa stood at a high school auditorium in the Bronx, dressed in a simple gray suit, holding a microphone in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. The room was packed, hundreds of teenagers, mostly black and brown, wearing uniforms, sneakers, and that blend of curiosity and skepticism only city kids can pull off. She set the paper down. "Didn't need it. I know some of you have already been told what you can't do," she began. Too loud, too quiet, too smart, too ambitious, too black. Too poor. Too much. She paused. Let it sink in. I've heard it all. I still do. But I'm here to tell you this. The people who underestimate you, they're not your problem. The problem is when you start believing them. The auditorium fell quiet. When I was your age, I told my guidance counselor I wanted to be a pilot. She laughed, said, "Maybe try customer service instead." That woman now flies on planes I own. Laughter. Gasps, a few claps. But it's not about revenge, Vanessa said. It's about vision. It's about knowing that sometimes you won't see anyone who looks like you where you want to go and going anyway. She scanned the room. Found a girl in the second row with bright eyes and a notebook already half filled with scribbles. You see a seat that wasn't made for you. Build your own applause erupted, but more than that, something shifted. Dozens of kids sat a little straighter, smiled a little bigger. A seed had been planted. Outside the school, Maya stood waiting by the car phone in hand. She looked up with a wide grin. "You killed it," she said. Vanessa chuckled. "They asked me to sign sneakers. I must be doing something right." Maya showed her the screen. "So, the clip from your speech last night. 8 million views in under 12 hours. The hashtag Vanessa built it is trending everywhere." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "That's a terrible hashtag." Too late. Maya smirked. "It's on shirts already." They both laughed, and for a moment it was just two women. Two stories joined, not by a viral moment, but by understanding. Maya lowered her voice. "Do you ever get tired of having to represent so much?" Vanessa looked out at the sidewalk where a young boy rode by on a scooter looking up at her like he'd just seen someone off TV. "All the time," she said. "But then I remember I'm not carrying all this because I asked to. I'm carrying it because someone once carried it for me." She opened the car door, then turned back. "Come on, I have a call with the FAA about hiring reforms. You're running point." Maya blinked. "Wait me. You said you wanted more responsibility, right? Welcome to turbulence." Later that evening, alone in her office, Vanessa stood by the window, overlooking the skyline, now bathed in gold. The sun was setting slowly, casting long shadows on the city she'd once dreamed of conquering. A small framed photo sat on her desk. Her age, 19, in a janitor's jumpsuit standing beside the wing of a plane, smiling like she owned the world, even though she hadn't yet stepped foot inside first class. Now she could sit anywhere she wanted, but more importantly, she could change who got to sit there next. She picked up a pen, scribbled a note onto a blank note card, folded it, slipped it into an envelope. To the next girl they underestimate. Don't argue. Don't shrink. Just build your own seat, and when it's ready, make sure someone else gets to sit next to you. She sealed the envelope, then placed it in a drawer filled with dozens more, because this wasn't a one-time moment. This was a movement, and it had just taken off. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment. We'd love to hear your voice. If it stayed with you, give it a like. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, consider subscribing.